Welcome back for another visit to Cashmere. It's your favorite night guard here again for another update from Cashmere Botanical Gardens. Today marks about a month since our grand reopening, and today we open our brand new tree exhibit. And if you thought the moving guardian tree was unsettling, then wait till you see what we have today. The fourth ring is now home to the trees with human faces. On the first day of the exhibit's grand opening, 3 trees were sitting in the ring, each with a different face. One was the face of a young man, complete with wavy hair that ran down his back and into the bark. The second was a middle-aged man, his glasses immaculately carved into the front of the wood. The third was the most chilling, an old woman with a ghostly O for a mouth and a gray bun that sat atop her head. Her face was frozen in shock, and she looked as if her last moments had been truly horrific. The people came to see them from across the county, and they even had some postcards printed up with their likeness. They were intrigued by the carvings, and I didn't correct them as I maybe should have. I knew that no knife had carved those faces. I'd watched her ladyship grow them herself, and they had sprung from the ground with the faces emblazoned in the wood. It's an honor to watch the lady work. She's so delicate, so precise, and she walks her plants through the stage of life like a video in fast motion. The lily pond was where she seemed to do most of her work, and it was there that she made her most impressive constructs. I was lucky enough to be asked to help tonight. She put together the trees with the faces, and it's something that I'll never forget. She'd gathered a few of us around her, and helping seemed to be her way of asking us to lend some of the essence that she had gifted us with. I'd helped before. The old-growth forest had taken a lot of energy and a lot of sessions, but it was worth it to get to watch her shape the wood and the plants. She drew a seed from the depths of the lily pond, the surface swirling with effort as she aged it from a seed to sapling, from sapling to tree. The leaves and branches began to sprout. The roots began to run, and as the face appeared, I remember gasping in surprise. It was as startling then as it was now, and I watched the teenage boy take shape upon the wood with startling clarity. She moved her hands like a maestro, weaving a symphony of wood before finally letting it splash into the pond, her work completed. Please, take it to the fourth ring, and be sure it has enough room to stretch. It will have company soon. True to her word, she made 2 others that night, and now they all stood within the ring, with room for more to come. No one seemed to question how 3 fully grown trees had simply risen from the Georgia soil, seemingly overnight, but they came in droves to see them. We usually had to keep a close watch over the new exhibits, guests wanting to climb inside for a closer look. But these trees seemed to be the exception. The guests crowded the barriers, snapped their pictures, and looked on in wonder. But they didn't get too close to these odd bits of flora. I suppose maybe it was something uncanny about the details on the human face. Or maybe they, like me, thought they might bite if they got too close. No one seemed in a hurry to cross the metal bar that separated the exhibits from the park. They were only a little freaky at first, but after only a week of being introduced to the park, they shifted into something downright spooky. One night, they started whispering. I was on night shift, something I like to do more often than not, and as I came around the fourth ring, I heard someone talking in a low voice. I looked around for other Brandy-Low, but I couldn't find anyone besides myself near the exhibit. It wasn't really like someone talking quietly either, not like a secret conversation or anything. It was more like someone whispering, someone who whispers instead of talks, and has gotten quite comfortable with it. The longer I listened, the more it sounded like a constant stream of spidery words, the kind that crawl across your ears from the mouth of an open mausoleum or from a cave at night. It was the skittering voice of the damned, and the closer I got to the exhibit, the surer I was that I didn't want to see who was talking. Coming within sight of the ring, I could see the light from the nearby lamppost as it lit the hellish faces, and I was unsurprised to see the lips of one moving in painful, creaking groans. It was the old woman, and the effort of speech seemed to be causing her as much pain as the tree itself. The wood creaked and groaned, unused to movements of that kind, and the whispers were coming from a throat with no opening. Her eyes had been brown and sightless just this morning, staring out into the park, but now they possessed a glassiness that made me think they were capable of sight. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could hear it from across the barrier and knew that the guests would be able to hear it tomorrow if it continued. I wanted to go to the lady, wanted to go to Randy, but also found that I wanted to hear what wisdom came from her. I had learned from my time as a brandy-low, as short as it had been, that there was wisdom in natural things, especially the old one. Racefell and I had had many such talks while I was on shift, and the things he told me were amazing. He had seen the Ice Age, lived through the tectonic shift, and had seen many different peoples come and go. The tree was newer, but what knowledge could be taken from their wooden hearts? My curiosity led me to do something that none of the guests had been brave enough to do, and I jumped the barrier and approached the old woman. Her eyes stared ahead, their gaze fixed at the stars that twinkled beyond the glare of the lamplight. She was whispering, as if she needed to get her truth out before her breath was taken, and the closer I slunk, the more I came to realize it was the same thing again and again. It wasn't a story. It wasn't even really a conversation. It was the same 3 or 4 sentences, again and again, as she told her tales to the stars. I moved in closer, afraid to put my ear too close, but wanting to hear it all. Pretty lady calls me. Pretty lady on the island calls for me to come to her. I stepped into the water, but the roots drug me down. I saw her looking down at me as I sank beneath the water, smiling as my bubbles rose. It was chilling, but she kept saying it again and again. I was less enthusiastic as I left, and when she stopped whispering at around 5 o'clock, I was glad I wouldn't have to listen to her throughout the day. I knew that no matter where I was, that voice would follow me. The whispering came back for the next 2 nights, always the same pitch, and always the same words. On the second night, however, the middle-aged man began to speak as well. I knew that something was different when I walked past the 3rd ring and heard a different voice as I approached the 4th. I had almost gotten used to the old lady as she whispered ceaselessly, but tonight there was a new voice amongst the litany. It was deeper, but it still whispered. It rose above hers, but couldn't quite dwarf it. They mingled together, forming a chorus, and I was over the barrier before I could think better of it. I'd lost most of my trepidation over them. They were a cool mystery to figure out, and I was looking forward to learning more. She crooked her finger, promised me the experience of a lifetime. As I sank below the water, I thought of my wife and felt ashamed. The lady had been right. The last moments of my life were quite an experience. I shivered a little as he repeated, "This one was different." He was talking about how the lady, my benefactor, had lured him to his death. It wasn't as if I hadn't seen her do it before. She had dragged Dr. Thurston into the depths and drowned him, Did I think he had been the only one? This place was known for mysterious disappearances. People still disappeared here, in fact. And I suppose they had to be going somewhere. I'd watched her work miracles from that pool, but I suppose there had to be a cost somewhere for such wonders. After that, I did go to Randy, but this was far from news to him. "Yeah, sounds about right," he said. "What do you mean it sounds about right?" I asked, almost speechless. "Their bodies beneath the lily pond. We all know that. Hell, you saw the roots take Thurston and Carl. You think they were the only ones, did you?" My face must have looked weird because he turned and put a hand on my shoulder. "Won't do you any good to get upset about it. We're not human anymore, kid. The people below that water ain't either. Not anymore. They're meat now. Meat for the ladies' table. Getting upset won't change it. Do your job. Serve the lady. Try not to think about the rest." I thought about that for the next few days as I walked my rounds, considering it all as I did my job. The job was all I really had left, as silly as that sounds. I was a creature with infinite time now, but I was still tied to the work I had been doing. This was my home now, I supposed, and the trees with faces weren't likely to be the strangest thing I ever saw. She had called my name 3 times before I looked up, and I immediately felt a cold chill run up me as I realized I had been ignoring my lady. My apologies, lady. I was lost in thought. It won't happen again. I'd gone to a knee, certain I was about to be scolded, but she smiled as she lifted me to my feet. "Your thoughts are important, my Brandylow. I would never seek to break you from them. I was going for an evening stroll and was wondering if you would walk with me. Some nights I find that I could use the company." She offered me an arm, and this time I did not hesitate, as I had once upon a time. I had feared her, feared where she might lead me then, but I knew now that wherever she went, I would gladly follow. We were walking past the 4th ring, the murmuring still a chorus, when she stopped and smiled happily at the trees. "Such interesting creations, are they not?" They are, I answered, though I didn't look at them. "I intend to make more of them, you know. There is much nourishment within the pool for them to take form from. My lady, may I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "You Brandylow are as children to me. I would refuse you nothing. Are the trees made from the people who go missing here?" I knew the answer, but I wanted to know if she would tell me. "They are," she said without hesitation. "The creatures of this world are such wonderful nourishment for the flora that they try to trample. It's only right that they should give back after crushing so much of it beneath their dwellings and their deeds. I stopped, trying to find a way to ask so it wouldn't make me sound crazy. "How is it that they talk? Are there souls there or something?" She cocked her head, seeming to think about the answer. "I don't know," she finally said, our route taking us past the old grove. "It's possible that something of their old self is trapped inside the wood, an echo of who they once were that will live on past their bodies. I didn't consider them strong enough for such, but I suppose these humans may be more interesting than I give them credit for." She left me then, saying she was going to the pool to do some work. "I'll unveil the newest tree tomorrow, so don't be late for the ceremony. Pleasant evening." I watched her go, not sure if I was excited for what would come in the morning or not, but knowing I would be there nonetheless. The next morning saw a small crowd arrive early for the unveiling of the latest piece for the exhibit. They couldn't believe that another tree would be added so soon, and most of the regulars couldn't wait to see what this one would look like. The new tree was already in place, and as I came up behind the crowd, I could hear them marveling at it. It had gone in just before opening, so I hadn't gotten a chance to peek last night, and as I came to the front to stop anyone from trying to get too close, I felt my breath stick in my throat. It appeared that the new tree was in honor of our old park director, the one who had disappeared after giving the lady her spot as chairman. Dr. Thurston's screaming face was visible from the front of the rich brown wood. His eyes were locked into something resembling sheer terror, and his mouth hung open in an eternal scream. The muscles of his face stood out like bands, and he looked like if he could talk, he wouldn't whisper. I dreaded the night he would add his voice to that chorus, but he never did. He did not whisper. For the next 3 weeks, whenever the sun went down, he screamed like a wounded cat. It was loud and long, a terrified wail that you could hear from across the park. They stopped whispering or yelling about a month later, and we were glad when Dr. Thurston was finally silent. By then, she had added a dozen other trees to the exhibit, and they all whispered their final eulogy for about a month before going silent. These were not the strangest of her creations, but they are the ones I remember the most. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear Dr. Thurston, and it reminds me that summer and spring can be just as brutal as the dead of winter. The lady is a being of great love and warmth, but that warmth can still burn her enemies. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.